How's it going? This is Nathan with Lesson 3. We're just going to dive right in. Remember to do the review. I'm not going to go through all the review, but refer to the notes for that. Reminding them, how many books are in the Old Testament, how many books are in the New Testament, how many days did it take God to create. Talk about the first dispensation. I always highlight the 3 mistakes that Eve made, talking about what death is. It's a separation. Talk about the 3 things required to be saved no matter what dispensation we're in. And then even going over what a dispensation is again. It's a time period where God deals with man concerning sin and salvation. Again, I'm just asking these questions to them, just seeing what they remember. The more repetitive you are, the more that it's retained. Talking about faith, obedience, and blood being required. So Adam and Eve needed it. So Cain and Abel also needed it. And it becomes this theme throughout the word. Talking about Noah. Innocence ends in judgment. The second dispensation of conscience. The promise of, the seed of the woman crushing the head of the serpent. God's judgment, the flood. And then the third dispensation, which is human government. So you got the first dispensation of conscience, the second dispensation of, the first dispensation of innocence, the second dispensation of conscience, and the third dispensation of human government. Which leads us into lesson 3, and we are going to talk about Lot in this one and go over some key things. There's some cool little nuggets in this Bible study as well. So start in Genesis 10, verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So he was a big deal. Nimrod was a really big deal. He was a leader. He was a hunter. People looked up for him for provisions. So he was a leader in this land. He was a role model, kind of like a celebrity, so to speak, But, just because we have the leadership capacity, I've always been told there's 2 parts to leadership. It's where you're leading and your leadership style. You could have a great leadership style, but lead people in the wrong direction, right? As we've noticed, people like Hitler, leadership style was able to lead a lot of people, but in the wrong direction. And then you can have a poor leadership style, but be leading people in the right direction. And we see that all the time. They're trying to get people to Jesus, but the way they're doing it, their style isn't a good style. So Genesis 11 verse 1 says, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So notice they were all with one language and one speech. Everyone was speaking the same language. Now, this is both a historical thing, but it's also speaking of them being in one mind, right, and in one accord at this time. But notice also in verse 4, it says, let's make us a name, right? Let us make us a name. So here they are, they're building this massive tower. All of the, in human government, this is the dispensation of human government. They're all coming together to build this tower, to reach unto heaven. And again, remember we talked about it. You can't come to God on your terms. You have to come to God on his terms. You can't just say, it's not about us accepting him. It's about us doing right. And just like Cain, he told Cain, if you do it right, you'll be accepted. And, the other thing about that is he told them to be scattered. And he said, and they were saying, lest we be scattered. But he said, be fruitful, multiply, and scatter the earth. And they were outwardly disobeying God in that sense. Verse 5, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. So even God knew. See, another thing is like when you come together, when two or three agree, right? Whether for good or for bad, that this is a sobering thing, is that people can come together for evil just as much as they can come together for good, right? And there's an antitype here. So I want you to notice this, that they were coming together, and the way God divided them was dividing their languages. So in the Old Testament, the Tower of Babel, and it's called Babel, you hear babbling on, so God divided the people by dividing their languages, so no one could understand each other. When you go to the New Testament, right, you talk about Pentecost, the day of Pentecost, they all were once again in one mind and in one accord, right, of one language. So God united his church by uniting their language. How hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we speak? So they could all, again, God reversed this at the day of Pentecost for the church. They could all understand each other. So again, he divided them by dividing their languages in the Old Testament. And then on Pentecost, the birth of the church, he united their languages so that they could understand each other, and that united the church. But he scatters them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth. So that's what his command was anyway. So they ended up doing that anyway. And so they left off building this city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their language. This is Genesis 11, verse 9. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And when we go to some insights here, so I'm going to go back a chapter, Genesis 10, verse 25. It says, and unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. So Peleg literally means the earth was divided. It's like this earthquake, right? Divided it. So if you've ever heard, so there you go. So in the lexicon, Peleg, division, land was divided. And if you look down at Strong's definition, it says earthquake. This is just kind of a side note nugget. If you've ever heard of Pangea, if you look at a map and you look at all of the continents, they almost look like puzzle pieces, that they used to be one land. So it's many people that study tectonic plates and earth say that the land was all one at one point, and then Peleg, or in the Bible how it says, there was an earthquake, it was divided. So in the dividing of the languages, the lands were also divided. So the people groups and nationalities got with each other because they could understand each other. So they started finding people that understood the same languages. And then it was divided, that Pangea, that one land was divided in those days. That happened right at the time of the dividing of the languages. So just something interesting. Genesis chapter 12. All right, so now we're going to talk about the dispensation of promise. This is the fourth dispensation, 12 verse 1 of Genesis. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Now notice the difference from Genesis 11, where they said, let us make us a name, versus chapter 12, the next chapter, where God says, I will make you a great name and a great nation. So it's not about, us individually or as a group being great. It's how we get there. Is it because we're trying to do it for ourselves in a prideful way, saying we don't need God? People trying to, be successful in life and do it in defiance to God and saying, I don't need God. Or is it because we're doing it to bring glory to God's name? God elevates our platform so that we can point to him. Is God making us a name so that we can use that to point to the greater name, which is Jesus? Verse 3 says, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So this was the promise. for in this dispensation to Abram. I'm going to bless them that bless thee, curse him that curseth thee, and all families of the earth will be blessed. All families. Verse 4, so Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Lord is still doing this today. He's still calling us, and this is a point of emphasis. He's calling us from where we are to where he wants us to go. He's calling you. He's calling me. He's been calling us. He's continuously calling us to go higher, to go deeper, to go somewhere that we haven't been before, to get out of our comfort zone and to leave where you're at and go where I'm calling you. That is still what he's doing for us today. So he does it, and he was 75 years old when he departed. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. So it looked like they still had some substance, and it looked like, apparently he brought Lot. Maybe they were business partners, who knows? But I do know it said, don't bring any of your kindred. He did bring his nephew Lot, though. Genesis chapter 13. So we go to the next chapter, and let's see what happens. In verse 2, it says, and Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. Verse 4, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, just from following Abram, right? So he also had a lot of substance. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Might have been why God said, don't bring your kindred, because, there's not going to be enough land, immediately where I'm bringing you. And verse 7 of Genesis 13, and there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. So he's like, look, man, we're brethren. Why are we fighting? There's all this land. Look, verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. At this point, he's kind of like, look, I'll go, I'll humble myself wherever you want. I understand we got this substance together. Partnerships are really tricky things, by the way. Partnerships can be very, very challenging. And so they are possible, but they can be very challenging. And so sometimes, in this situation, look, you just kind of have to get out of it. You got to kind of let go of some things. And so he said, look, I'll take the lesser of the land, whatever you want. So what happened is in verse 10 says, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. So it looked like the garden of the Lord. I mean, it was a beautiful land, flourishing, looked great. In verse 11, then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. And Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan. It's pretty much desert. And Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. So a lot going on here. One of which is the faith of Abraham is displayed. The faith of Abram is displayed in that he was willing to take the seemingly lesser land, believing that God was still going to bless him, because that was his promise. So this is one of the first points that we really see Abram beginning to trust God and have faith and say, you know what, even if I go to the desert, God will bless me, because that is exactly what he said he would do. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to do some of the things we do and what God calls us to do, but that's where faith is activated. If God made a promise, I will bless you in the land I'm bringing you, even if it looks deserted, that is because that's where God will get his glory from, when he does what only he can do. But Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and he pitched his tent toward Sodom. So he starts in the cities of the plain, right? He's not in the valley. He's not on the mountain. He's not up. He's not down. He's just kind of in the flat ground, the plain. But he pitches his tent towards Sodom. Now, here's what the significance is in verse 13. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And verse 19. Genesis chapter 19, verse 1, it says, And there came two angels to Sodom and even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. So these angels came to Lot. He sees them in the street, and he kind of knows. Now, notice this, that where is he at, right? He's pitching his tent towards Sodom. They're wicked men. It's evil. There's all kinds of evil going on. He's not there, but he's just watching it. He's just looking at it. And we're going to see is it's just a matter of time before we are watching it, looking at it, entertaining our senses with it. What are we reading, looking? This goes back to lesson 1 with what are we feeding our mind? What environment are we staying in? Who is our reference group? And when we associate with that and we're watching it and entertaining ourselves with it, it's just a matter of time. Because it says Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. That means he was a leader. He was actually a judge. He wasn't just pitching his tent towards it. He was now there, living in the very place that he used to just pitch his tent towards. And so now he's in this wickedness. He sees these angels. He's trying to bring them in. They're like, nah, we'll just stay out here in the streets. Verse 3, and he pressed upon them greatly, right? So he had a sense of urgency. He pressed upon them greatly. And so finally they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast. He baked unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they laid down, now look, he's basically saying, look, guys, I don't think you realize where you're at, man. We're in the hood. We're in the projects. Like, this place isn't good. You can't just be hanging out here all night. You better come inside. He pressed upon them greatly. But before they could even go to bed, he thought he had them safe, right? He thought they were safe. And in this culture, it's important to make sure that people have safety when they come into your house. It was a very hospitable thing, very hospitable, still is in the Middle East. Even the men of Sodom, all the men of the city, even the men of Sodom compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every single quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Now, it's not talking about, hey, we're just wanting to play some Uno and have a barbecue. It's talking about we want to know them like a man knows his wife in intimacy, right? And so this is how wicked this place was. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him and said, Look, guys, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. They're virgins. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you. Like, what kind of dad is this? And do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Now, it looks like that's real noble, but what kind of father is going to bring his virgin daughters out and leave them for dead? Right? Basically, to all the men, here, take these, and you just do whatever you want. Just don't do anything to these guys. Now, I get he's trying to protect them, but still, what kind of dad? What kind of relationship? You can tell he lacks a relationship with God. And how did this all start? Where did this wickedness and this mindset come from? Well, it started with just pitching his tent towards evil, wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where it all started. What was he pitching himself to? What news was he feeding his mind, right? What kind of things what kind of garbage was he feeding himself in his mind and in his spirit? Verse 9, and they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them? So they said, Look, bud, if you don't bring those men out, we'll do worse to you. And who knows what they would have done afterwards anyway. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men, speaking of the angels, put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Now, this is what's interesting. This is how evil they were, that even when they were blinded now, God forbid any of us would find ourselves in a situation where we're trying to do something this wicked. However, if we were in a situation and all of a sudden everybody became blinded, I would think that I would have taken note and been like, okay, we better turn back. But they were so evil and wicked. The sin of that city had such a grip on them that it says they wearied themselves to find the door. They were still trying to find the door, to break it down and to get to these men. And the men said unto Lot, speaking of the angels, hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So he wasn't really taking it serious. There's urging him, like, look, God's going to destroy this place. We just spared you, okay? So hurry up. If there's anybody else you want to get out of here, get them out. Do you have son-in-laws, thy sons, your daughters, whoever else is in the city, get them out of this place. And he had an opportunity. He had an opportunity to save more of his family, just like each of us have an opportunity to reach and save more of our family. But when he was initially called, he did not take the call seriously, right? And this is kind of a theme with Lot, as he just drags his feet. He procrastinates when he's called to do something. God called him to do something, and it's the law of diminishing intent. The slower it takes you to do something, the less likely you're going to be to do it. Verse 15 of Genesis 19, and when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, like, bro, like, what are you doing? Saying, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Now, look, it's talking about just being consumed in the iniquity of the city. He's not even talking about just the burning and the fire. He's talking about they're going to be consumed with all the wickedness and the iniquity of the city. In verse 16, and while he lingered, look at this, and while he lingered, right? These angels are warning him. They're urging him. It's going to be destroyed. You're going to get consumed in the evil and wickedness by staying in the city. Like, get out. And it says he lingered. Why? Well, that's what sin does. It has such a grip on you. And you don't even want, it's like these moths, that are attracted. If you go to the South, especially, have these bug zappers that have a light. And these lights attract these bugs. And it zaps them. And the bugs see their buddies being zapped. Oh, my goodness, you see old Leroy over there. He just got blasted by that zapper. Yeah, I'm going to go check out the light, right? And so they go to check out the light. Boom, oh, my goodness. And it's like, the alcoholic's the same way, the drug addict. They see that others who get involved in this, it's destroying their life. It messes them up. Nobody's strong enough to overcome it on their own free will, and it takes you deeper and deeper and messes you up, and it distorts your thinking, perverts your mind. Your judgment is distorted. And how did this all start again? That's right. Pitching his tent towards Sodom. I was just watching it. I was just entertaining myself with it. I was just listening to the music. I was just watching the show and the movies. And it started with just entertainment, watching it and pitching his tent towards the wickedness of Sodom, the evil. Now he's in it. Now he's wrapped up in it. He's deep in it, and it's messing him up. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife, upon the hand of his 2 daughters. Look, he could have saved more, but it was just his wife and his couple daughters. The Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. Now, this is the mercies and grace of God. Literally dragged him out of the city, even when he lingered. Man, that's the mercies of God for us. In our humanity, we just want to linger. I wanted to linger in sin. It wasn't until in my way that the angel dragged me out was when I went to jail, and it gave me an opportunity to repent. But if that hadn't happened, if I hadn't gotten caught by the cops, that was the Lord's mercy on my life. If that wouldn't have happened, God knows where I would have been, how deep I would have gone in that lifestyle. But the Lord was merciful, allowed me to get caught, allowed me to go to jail, allowed me to find a place where there was no distractions, where I could repent. And a lot of people can identify that. It's usually when we get to the lowest place that we have an opportunity to drown out the noise and turn to God. In verse 17, and it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, and he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my Lord. Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight. Oh, yeah, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. So they're telling him, look, escape for thy life. Look not behind thee. Don't go. Now listen, don't stay in the plain. Go to the mountain. Go higher. So don't go back to the sinful nature, but don't stay average either. Go to the mountain. Go to your place of purpose. And this is his nature. First he lingers in the city. He mocks when he's trying to save his family. And now he gets brought out, and he still doesn't want to take heed. At this point, you would think these angels know a little bit about what they're talking about. But he didn't want to heed the voice of the Lord through these men. And so he said, oh, no, I don't want to die, So what's he say? Behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. Come on, it's not a big sin. It's just a little bit of sin. But remember, it's the little sins that keep us from our purpose. It's not always the big ones. It's the small ones. It's the seemingly insignificant ones that keep us from our calling and from our purpose. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. Again, it's not about us accepting him. It's about him accepting us. And the Lord, in this point, accepted him concerning this request and said, Fine, haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything until thou come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Now we're way more than halfway done. We're going to finish up here, but this is an interesting thing, and I want you to understand what Zoar actually means. Because this is talking about, look, if you go to Revelation 3:16, it says, So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. God doesn't like average. He says, be hot or cold. That's what the angels told him. They said, look, don't look behind, don't go back to the sinful nature. But also, I want you to go higher. Go to your purpose. Go to your purpose. Don't be average. God's allergic to average. He says, if you're lukewarm, if you're average, I'm allergic to that. I'd rather you be hot or cold. If you think of Egypt in the New Testament, which we haven't gotten to, but Egypt is a type of sin. The wilderness is a type of the average. That's where they wandered for 40 years. And the promised land was where God wanted them to go. That was the purpose. So again, you have your sinful nature, you have your average nature, and you have your purpose. See, God will oftentimes bring people out of sin, out of Egypt. But when you just sit on a pew, you don't get involved in anything, you don't commit yourself to any ministry or gifting that God has given you to reach other people, to bring out other people. See, Lot could have saved more people, but didn't. That's what God doesn't like. He would rather if you just stayed back in the sinful nature than for you to get brought out and do absolutely nothing with what God has given you. And if you look up Zoar, it literally means place of insignificance, lukewarm, or average. He went to a place of insignificance. God wants us to go to the mountains. He doesn't want us to stay insignificant. So Genesis 19, verse 24. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. So again, she did turn back. She didn't just look, but she turned back after that sinful nature. How often do we see that happen? People come to church and they pray through or they get baptized, and then where do they go? Well, they turned back towards the city. They turned back. And if you actually go to where Sodom and Gomorrah was today, it's actually modern day the Dead Sea. And it's called the Dead Sea because it is full of pillars of salt, ironically. And nothing can live in there because it's so salty. Nothing lives in the Dead Sea. And something interesting about the Dead Sea is that actually they found out each year the deepest level, goes deeper and deeper and deeper each year. It's this phenomenon. And it's just like sin. Nothing can live in sin. The wages of sin is death. And not only that, it takes you deeper and deeper each time. It takes you deeper and deeper. When you first get started into sin, you have no one wakes up and says, I want to be a drug addict that's homeless, living in abandoned buildings and in tents in the woods. No one wakes up thinking that, but it takes you deeper and deeper. No one says, I want to be the greatest murderer and thief and steal and go to prison. But it takes you deeper and deeper. That's what happens. In verse 27, it says, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain, this is verse 29, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. The only reason Lot was even saved was because Abraham interceded for his nephew Lot. That's the only reason. So what kind of power do we have with God? Who are some people in your life that you know are lingering and dwelling in places of sin in their life, and you want to see them liberated and set free, that you can pray and ask God to intercede for them? Maybe it's friends, maybe it's co-workers. Who is it? Is it family that you can intercede for? Verse 30, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain. Look, he eventually goes to the mountain anyway, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar. And he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. Now, he finally goes to the mountain, but the problem is that you can miss the timing of God. Usually when you go to the mountain, there's great things that happen on the mountain. Moses got the commandments on the mountain. Jesus had the transfiguration on the mountain. And so a lot of great things can happen on the mountain. But it's possible if we don't listen and obey. Remember, faith and obedience and the shedding of blood. If we don't obey God right when he tells us to, we can miss the timing of God for our lives. But he eventually gets out, because now, at first he was afraid to go to the mountain. Now he's afraid to stay in Zoar. And so he takes his 2 daughters with him, because now his wife's gone. He could have saved his wife, possibly, if he would have obeyed. He could have saved more people. Again, there's people in our lives that but it's very timely. There's a window and a space of time where we can reach people if we take action now. It said Noah moved with fear. He moved with an urgency to prepare an ark to save his family. Lot did the opposite. He lingered and didn't move with fear or with an urgency. Genesis 19, verse 31, as we wrap up, and the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Barbaric. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites, unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ami, the same as the father of the children of Ammon, this day. So this is how wicked, and this is where we have to understand that sin doesn't just affect us, but it affects everyone around us, affects our children. This is generational. Our people are watching us, whether you have children or not. If you do have children, you're influencing them. They're not caring about what you say and your rules. They're watching you. They're going to mirror your mindsets. When you're in trials and challenges and adversities, they're watching you. How does my mom and dad respond to this kind of situation, right? If you've got peers and they know that you're a Christian and a believer, they're watching you. How do they respond? Right? How do they react to adversities and things that happen in their life? So his daughters were watching him. And how did this all start again? Oh yeah, that's right. He was pitching his tent towards Sodom, which was wicked and evil and sinning exceedingly, right? He was entertaining. He went from just watching it, reading it, listening to it. So what things do we feed our mind? What are we listening to? What are we allowing our senses to be bombarded with? That is what's going to change our thinking and ultimately lead us, whether it's to God or into sin. But now it affects his daughters, and his daughters then have children, and these children are still the enemies of the people of God, of Israel, the children of Israel, even to this day. And it affected not just him, but his kids. So it's always important for us to have a reason why. Why are you, what we do, what's our reason why? We should look not just to ourselves, but who are the people that we are impacting, influencing, and affecting through our decisions. And that's it. And that's the lesson. And the biggest theme is, again, we're hitting on repentance so big that we've got to turn from sin. We've got to move with fear, with an urgency. We can't just say, I'll get baptized in a week. We might not have next week. I'll get the Holy Ghost another time. No, we've got to be ready now, like lesson 2 we talked about, right? And so we've got to turn from it. And we have to always be careful. What are we pitching our tent towards? What are you pitching your tent towards each day? Is it towards sin, or is it towards the things of God? We'll see you on the next one.